Good evening, everyone. This is Jeff with Astroscoop, Deep Dive Astrology Coaching. It is 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and today is March 15th, 2025, and I apologize for the lack of live stream last night on the 14th. The stars just didn't align with my timing, so I had to cancel it at the last minute. And yesterday was the full moon, but today is the 15th, 2025, which is still technically the full moon, period. And we'll talk about that tonight, as well as the very last few days of Pisces and the Pisces Aries Cusp, with spring starting on the 20th, March 20th. So we'll wait a few minutes and see if I see a couple people are in. Carolyn says, happy Saturday as well. Yes, I know it's usually Friday. I know I was almost thinking it was Friday as well, but it is Saturday. And we'll wait and see if anyone else comes in. I'm looking here, and tonight, now with the time, the daylight savings, now it doesn't get dark here until after 7 p.m., which is a huge difference. It's just beautiful. So it's really only been dark for about an hour. So it's a whole different energy. Now, this weekend is the last weekend of winter here in this hemisphere. And so we have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is spring. And then we will be in Aries. But tonight, we'll talk about the Pisces Aries Cusp, which runs from the 19th of March to right around the 24th or 25th. And that's a very, very important cusp. I always mention this when I talk about cusps, how much I love the cusp periods. But this cusp in particular is probably the most important because it resets the whole zodiac cycle or cosmic cycle in motion to go through the entire 12 signs again. So we've been talking about for weeks, talking about Pisces and the various decanates of Pisces. And we're still in Pisces, but this is a very, very late degree. Here, before we get into the main stuff, the full moon Virgo was on the 14th, was at 2:55 a.m. So we had the sun at 23 and the moon at 23 of Virgo. So I've seen other astrologers talk about this week. So what was really important about this is, of course, once a year around this week, we have a Pisces sun and a Virgo moon that are opposed, as Pisces and Virgo are in the zodiac. This week being late, such a late degree in the last decan of the mutable signs, it really was a catalyst for all of this late Pisces stellium energy that we've been talking about for weeks. And it activated that opposition very strongly with all the Pisces there. So it's like throwing all this fantasy, this Pisces fantasy energy, and then throwing that practical Virgo moon energy into it, which is completely different. And then yesterday, it was at that time, it was the Sagittarius rising degree, which changes quickly, but that was also part of the square, and the Gemini descendant over here, the 29 Gemini. So it really involved a mutable T-square. So anyone that has late degree, 23 or later degree of any mutable sign, Pisces, Virgo, Sag, or Gemini, this would be very, very significant in your life right now, depending on what houses that falls in. And I was just talking with another astrologer, and we were talking about how having, in a general sense, having mutable signs in your chart it's always good to have a well-balanced chart between cardinal, fixed, and mutable, which are the qualities of the signs. And you'll hear a lot of kind of the old school astrologers talk about that. And many charts are unbalanced, But having mutable signs, I think, and I was talking about this with another astrologer, is that it really, really helps to open up and helps to adapt to change, to changing frequencies and currents in your life and in your environment. And without major mutable signs, like Pisces, it's much harder for the individual to adapt, or in Pisces' case, adapt, swim, change, modify your behavior. It's very hard for charts that don't have mutable. Now, of course, there's pros and cons of having too much mutable or too much cardinal or too much fixed. But just in a general sense, having this mutable T-square open up on the late mutable signs can be could make people very restless, but it can also spark a good deal of change, a good deal of, if you're stuck in any way, the mutable signs can help move things along. And that's why you have cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Now tonight, when we talk about this cusp, we're finishing up Pisces, which is mutable, water, but then we're introducing the Aries quality, which is cardinal, and it's cardinal fire. So that adds a whole nother element into this cusp. All right, so we're in a few minutes. And don't forget, I have weekly live streams here on YouTube at Astroscoop 3801. And please tell your family and friends. It's usually Friday nights at 8 p.m. here on YouTube. And I'm also on Instagram, which is Astroscoop7, and X, which is Astro_Scoop, where you can follow me. And I always post on there about the YouTube stuff, videos, and also the live streams. So wherever you choose to follow me, I always share the same posts. So you'll see what's coming up. But most importantly, please subscribe. Sign in to your Google account and subscribe, all or personalized for the videos and the live streams, so that you don't miss out and that you stay in the flow and stay in the know of everything that's coming up with Astroscoop and astrology, the planets, transits, all this good stuff. So, oh, and don't forget to share as well. Don't forget to share, especially if you have family members that don't have these accounts. You know, at the very least, they could even just go into the YouTube browser and look up Astroscoop and sign and just watch a video, which also helps my videos by just getting views as well. But ultimately, we want to engage the subscriber base so that we can have more lively live streams, at some point. That's what we want to have. So tonight is the Pisces Aries Cusp. And like I said, it runs from the 19th to the 24th to 25th. So tonight's the 15th. So if you're a Pisces or know someone that's born today through the weekend, there's still a Pisces 3. And we talked last week about Pisces being ruled by Neptune and to a lesser degree Jupiter, and also co-ruled by Pluto, and having the intensity of Pluto color their emotions more so than maybe an earlier Pisces in the first or second decanate. So Pisces people born this week, which I talked about last week, the 3, are kind of very intense dreamers. I said that they dream in a deep way, they philosophize in a very deep way, and they're devoted to their causes and their people in a very devoted way. But again, that's all Pisces. That's all Neptune, with the co-ruler being Pluto, which is a Scorpio influence, and that's this week. So depending on the degrees, you have to look up your degree on the chart, but that ends right around the 18th. So we just have a few more days of Pisces, and then we have about 3 or 4 more days of the last decan of Pisces. And then, of course, we start spring at 5:01 a.m. On the 20th. So when we wake up on the 20th, it's actually have almost a full day of spring on the first day. So it seems early. For some reason, it's coming up so quick, or maybe because we've had such a bad winter, at least here in the East Coast. So that's a wonderful thing, and we're going to talk all about that and give a little prelude to Aries as we'll start talking about Aries over the next few weeks. But that full moon that we had yesterday, like I mentioned, all the mutable signs, very, very strong. And I mentioned last week how we have Mercury stationing now at Aries, and then Venus is retrograde in Aries. So as we've been dealing with all this watery Neptune Pisces energy that's been so strong, we're going to be flooded, but not with water this time. We're going to be flooded with Aries, and the fire sign energy is going to be so strong. And wherever that is in your chart, when we get into Aries and we talk about that, it's probably the best time of the year. One could argue that Capricorn is the best time of the year to set your long-term goals and achieve, because Capricorn is such a strong sign, and it's also on the winter solstice. So wherever Capricorn is in your chart is where you'll strive for for long-term gain. But probably the best time to initiate ideas and to start something positive and new is the rebirth of the zodiac, which is the Pisces Aries Cusp, and then ultimately going into the first Aries decan and having pure Aries. So wherever that is in your chart, wherever you have late degrees of Pisces, like 27, 28, 29, 30, and then 0 of Aries, 1 of Aries, which is all cusp, that's a really beautiful, magical kind of portion of your natal chart where you can kind of have a childlike wonder about starting new things, or taking something that you just did start, maybe in the winter when we were in Capricorn, another cardinal sign, and bringing a new, fresh perspective to it as we start the whole cosmic cycle again. And now I mentioned with Pisces last week, this is the last actual week of the whole zodiac that's a pure sign. So a Pisces person born this week has a lot of wisdom. They may or may not be a very evolved and mature person. You could have someone that has wisdom and yet would be personally immature or not evolved. You could have that simultaneously, right? Or you could have a very mature person that hasn't learned a lot about life or did bring a lot over from a past life, and they may not seem or feel as wise. But someone born this week in Pisces is absolutely a very strong, wise elder, because you're talking about 12 signs of someone completing a life cycle of someone in their 80s, mid 80s to late 80s, if someone lived that long. And that's basically someone. So for someone that's 84 or older, you have basically completed an entire actual lifetime of the zodiac in real time, you could say. And then, of course, if you believe in past lives or reincarnation, you were all those different signs, different energies, different genders, with your family or friends that are significant in another time, that you were playing out certain scenarios and lessons, or karmic lessons. But so ending the zodiac with the very last degrees of Pisces is like going from a baby to an elder at the end of his or her life. And starting this cusp on the 19th is a resurrection. So it is a true resurrection, regeneration of the entire energy of the zodiac cycle. That's really what it is. And I know that I received a comment a couple weeks ago. I received a comment from someone that's into astrology from another country. So I know that they were using probably Vedic astrology, or they were referring to Vedic astrology, sidereal astrology, most likely. And they were telling me how I'm a month off with my degrees, and that this wouldn't be Pisces, this would be Aquarius. And then when it's Aries, it would be Pisces. So again, that's a whole nother system. Many say that that's the more accurate system rather than tropical astrology. That is up for debate. It always has been and always will be. And there is validity to that. However, a system that I follow and that so many other people follow that I respect, that have so much intelligence and wisdom around astrology, and not just cerebral intelligence, but intuitive intelligence on how things work. Um, you know, Joanne Woolfolk is an astrologer from the East Coast from years ago, and she wrote a book called The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need. And in some ways, it was very simple and straightforward, but she covered so much ground, so much complexity of astrology, and she just put it together in a book that was very easy to read, but yet not overly simple, if that makes any sense. So that's someone that used that system and explained the history of it in a very simple way, but extremely effective. And Robert Hand, who I mentioned, who's an older astrologer who's now doing reels on Instagram, he's wrote very complex books and publications and astrology programs. And again, he is, talk about deep dive, my gosh, amazing how penetrating his work is. But then he also can cut through the layers of the earth and give you a whole paragraph of something, planets in transit, in one sentence. And yet he gives enough to make it make sense. So there's a lot there. All the astrology systems have value. So for me, using my system of right around the 19th or 20th, you have to look up your birthday to see what the degree is. You are an absolute Pisces Aries cusp. Then with the 20th on this year in the morning, if a baby's born after 5 a.m. on the 20th, he or she is an Aries, but a true cusp baby. So that resurrection, the regeneration, the rebirth, that's what Pisces Aries cusp is, because it's the ending. It's all that wise energy of the Pisces, which really encompasses all the signs of the zodiac, and then comes right up to the child, the baby, the infant of Aries on the 20th, which will be 0, and then the 21st will be the first full day of Aries. So in most years, almost any year in history that you can look up an ephemeris and look up the degrees of a chart, you would have the 21st or 22nd of March that are the very first day, first real full day of Aries, but it's still, most astrologers agree, it's still a cusp degree that'll have a little Pisces influence. When it gets to around, when you start to get to the 25th, 26th, 27th, now you're moving away from the cusp and you're into the true early Aries energy, which we'll talk about next week, which will be pure Mars. But this is definitely a cusp energy coming up. And what's interesting is when you feel and you wake up Thursday morning, especially if you're on the East Coast, if you wake up Thursday morning, whatever time you wake up, I'll probably wake up at like 6:30, probably Thursday. So when I wake up, it'll be Aries. If you wake up at 4, it'll still be Pisces. But whenever you wake up, see if you feel, just see what your response is to the energy of the weather, the energy outside. Does it feel different? Does it feel like a shift? Does it feel more energetic in any way? It should, especially for Aries people. Aries people should feel it most poignantly, especially early Aries people. But again, it depends on where it is in your chart and also your own rhythms and your own health and energy level and things like that. But there will be a shift, and it will feel a little bit like Pisces, and it'll feel a little bit like spring. Just like in certain states, the weather feels a little bit like winter part of the day, and it feels a little bit like spring part of the day. We had some wind chill this week that was so cold, but yet then the next day the wind chill was gone and it was like 60 degrees and it felt like spring. So, it's interesting that changeability of Pisces coming right up into Aries, which is a more definitive weather energy, which is spring, at least here in this area. So that regeneration is what the zodiac is all about. And so someone that's born on this cusp, especially if you're born on the 20th, if you're born on the first day or the 0 degree of Aries and you're a cusper, That's probably one of the most, if not the most unique degree in the zodiac to have, because you are an Aries starting the whole zodiac. You have nothing behind you. So a 0 or a 1 degree Aries person would be, in theory, the most childlike person you could meet, no matter what their age is, whether they're a child or not. They would have some kind of wonder in them and some kind of faith that would be so childlike that life hasn't hurt the person sufficiently enough for them to not trust in the process or have enough, faith or optimism that certain things can work out. But this cusp is very elemental, and it's kind of elemental like the weather. So in the East Coast here, the weather pattern here, at least for the next 2 or 3 weeks, is very unstable. We'll have, like I said, we'll have the spring type weather. We'll have wintry winds. Then that'll die down and it'll just be chilly. And of course, there's other areas of the world that have that too. But it's just interesting that that combination of going from a water sign to a fire sign and not quite having full days that feel like either. Most likely not until mid to late April, and definitely early May here, when we really feel like spring has kicked in, at least weather-wise. Spring has kicked in and the Aries energy has done its work getting through the start. But the Pisces Aries cusp is the cusp. It is the regeneration cusp of the zodiac. We start everything over again. And the people that I've known that are born this week, not too many that I can think of, but I know of 2 people that are probably both are over 60, and they definitely still approach life in an incredibly enthusiastic way, almost childlike. And they're definitely both of them are over 60. So that's interesting. And you wouldn't say that about every 60-year-old, but being a Pisces Aries that they are, one of them born as the 21st, I think one is the 20th. So, you're dealing with either a very, very late 29 degree Pisces, or you're dealing with a very, very early, like 0 Aries, which is basically the same, but yet you still have to be one sign and you'll have the traits of the other sign. So it's elemental like the weather, and it causes extreme steam, which is fire and water coming together, extreme steam. And someone born on this cusp would be, this is definitely someone that has a childlike or even childish approach to some things in their life that will absolutely irritate the heck out of everyone else that's not born on this cusp. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily negative. It just means the way they do something will be childlike, where there's so many other sign combinations that would go, why would this person approach that like this? This person is 50 years old or 60 years old or 40. Having a childlike wonder can be good in some situations, and in others in life, it's not appropriate. It's kind of like knowing when to be serious and when to be silly. So it's not always easy. And for the Pisces Aries person, that is that elemental energy like weather that comes up on any given day in their life. You have to look to their Neptune and you have to look to Mars in their charts. That'll give you big, a lot of creative Aries Pisces people in history, really, really creative people. Usually I've tended to see have a Mars in an air sign or Mars in a water sign, which is interesting. So highly creative people that are Pisces Aries often have a natal Mars sign in air, which would be highly intelligent and versatile, or water, and more feeling oriented and more creative with their energy. So very important to look at Mars, but you have to consider that Pisces part too. So the elemental extreme steam. So people on this cusp can get themselves, they're like a pressure cooker at times. They can be very gentle, but they can also be very intense and tense with all that emotional energy, and then you're adding in a little sprinkle of this early fiery, direct fire, unfiltered. That's what early Aries energy is, this unfiltered energy. Hasn't been filtered through anything. So, and yet you have this late Pisces, wise wisdom energy coming into that early Aries. So we have the symbols, we have the fishes, obviously, and to a lesser extent, I've mentioned that a lot of astrologers in mythology says that stronger Pisces people tend to be more like whales or big sea creatures rather than more smaller, kind of, non-powerful fish. So I think a lot of late Pisces people can be very much like a fish or a whale, depending on their upbringing, their confidence, and also where their Neptune falls in their chart. That's very important. And then so it's fishes and whales versus rams or sheep. So the early Aries person on this cusp, like a 0 or a 1 or a 2 Aries person, is ruled by Mars, the ram, but they could also be a sheep. And I'll talk more about this next week when we talk just about Aries. But very often a Pisces Aries person can be a sheep in their personal life and a ram in their work life or in the outer world, or more of a sheep or a follower in their work and more of a ram or leader type in their personal life. Very often Aries energy works like that in a natal chart. And again, you really have to look at Mars. You know, if you have an Aries person, a Pisces Aries person, and they have Mars in Virgo, you know, a more mild-mannered sign, more critical, more mental, practical, that's going to throw the whole Pisces Aries cusp energy off much differently. But then if your Pisces Aries person had Mars in Leo, which would add to commanding fire, or Mars in Sagittarius, which would be more adventurous, another fire sign, then that would just add to some of that steam, depending on where they channel it and put it in their lives. That's definitely very, very important for people this week to channel that energy, because as we know, any parent or grandparent knows that, childlike energy, let's say, I don't know, let's say children under 12, let's say children under 11, know that that childlike energy, that impulsivity, or the lack of understanding context or safety in your environment or things what you're doing, that kids don't get or don't want to get. That's not always. There's times in life where, and as an adult, that's not going to do you well. That kind of approach is not going to be respected by some of the more wise or mature energies in the zodiac. But again, that doesn't mean the Pisces Aries person is immature. There could be a difference between being too childlike or childish and being immature, or they could be both. But again, it's evolvement. It's evolvement. That's why when you see reels, I see a lot of reels online about people saying the top 5 worst signs or whatever. I guess there's a place for that, but they don't really explain in a sufficient way why you think these are the first. What do you mean worst signs? What does that mean? Worst to what? If you say the top 5 signs most likely to be aggressive, that's okay. That's more specific. If you mention Aries or something, but there's a lot of these reels that talk about these, the energies about that, all Aries are like this. Again, that's like the sun sign astrology that you have to look deeper. So that's not really fair to one sign or any sign, because it's evolvement and maturity in the individual and how we've been brought up and whether we've traveled and what kind of work we've done and have we learned from our mistakes and all that. So that all goes into, and that's really important for anywhere there's Pisces too in the chart. Pisces is so susceptible to outer influences. I watched a reel today from an astrologer, and he said too much Piscean energy can too easily agree with another person without really hearing the evidence, just agreeing to agree. So Pisces has to be careful of that. And Pisces Aries people would also have to be careful as well. So those are the animals and creatures, depending on the level of involvement that a Pisces Aries person would be. But balance is really important. The opposite in 6 months, we'll be talking about the Virgo Libra cusp, the cusp of beauty. And Virgo is sensation, and Libra is more thought, more thoughtfulness. And also, what's interesting is, so a Pisces Aries person could learn balance through a Virgo Libra person there, because they are so different. But what's interesting is this cusp and the Virgo Libra cusp are the two cusps where the days and nights are basically equal. So it is truly about balance between those signs, Pisces and Virgo, and Aries and Libra. So any astrologer that's looked at a number of charts, you'll notice there's a big theme usually in relationships and also with friendships, where people that you know have an opposite signs in their chart from signs that you have. There's a lot of opposite, and there's pros and cons to that astrologically, but the opposition more than any other aspect, and Virgo and Pisces are opposite, and Aries and Libra creates a vortex of energy where you can complement each other. You can be at odds because you're too different and opposed, but opposed doesn't always mean fighting or negative. It just means having to understand or respect the other difference, kind of thing. And there's also an attraction there to kind of like, this sign has what I lack, kind of thing. So that's very, 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 very present. And when we get to Aries next week, I'll talk a little about Libra, about the opposing sign Libra. It's very much a theme in Aries Libra people with that balance. And that's a pair that's really strikingly attracted to each other because of that oppositional sort of energy. But the days and nights are almost similar. So in some kind of way, starting the zodiac, Pisces Aries Cusp people are raw and impulsive, but they're also maybe in some secret way, they're seeking balance, like the Libra cusp would be. So this kind of energy, the water and the fire, can create a bickering kind of energy, bickering and differing. And it's hard for Pisces Aries people to, it's hard for them to understand why someone else doesn't understand them, if that makes sense. So they want to be understood. They don't want to be misunderstood. And that's very much a Pisces theme too. And Pisces are often very different, are a little offbeat, Pisces planets. So sometimes people just don't get it. It's not that they're against it, they just don't get it. But this Pisces Aries energy can be bickering and differing, and it's wise yet naive. So it's like the last sign, wise, the first sign, a little bit naive, as a baby that's coming into the world and starting the zodiac cycle from this incredibly fresh perspective of spring, of the equinox, the spring equinox. So it's a complete mix. And one actor, Matthew Broderick, is one early Aries actor on this cusp that I think very much fits a Pisces Aries cusp. The character that he played in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and a lot of the theater work that Matthew's done in New York is very boyish, but it's also very whimsical and he totally has that Aries, but he has the Pisces. Then I see the Pisces, then I see the Aries. He's boyish, and he's a perfect example of that kind of energy taken together. So wise yet naive, that's kind of a combination. So the stars there's a star called Sheet, which is a very late degree Mars, Pisces, especially late degree Pisces energy. And you usually have to have 28, 29, or 0 degrees of Aries to be conjunct that orb of sheep. But that in ancient times, that was a very heavy and melancholy star that had to do with either death or drownings. And it was Saturnian in nature, according to Edgar Casey was involved with that. And so it's a very heavy, as any Pisces can be, kind of maybe a wet blanket and very melancholy and possibly sad. But again, the stars are not always literal. The translations, I don't think, are always literal. So if the person's drowning or has a tendency to accidents that involve water, that could mean many different things. That could mean slipping outside because Pisces rules the feet. But on this cusp, someone could be in early Aries and they would rule the head or the skull. So again, that's why you have to take, on the cusp, you have to take both. I've had comments from people on my videos that say, you know, I'm a first day Scorpio or whatever. I don't feel like a Scorpio, or, you know, I'm a Libra. So, you know, if you're that early of a sign, if you're 0, you barely got into the sign. Of course, you're going to feel like the sign right before it. And maybe something else in the chart is reinforcing why you feel more of one sign on the cusp than the other sign, even if you're a 29 degree or a 0 sign, but you're the sign right before it, right after, maybe by 1 degree. You might feel that. There might be something in your chart with that ruling planet that is activating that. So she is a main star for here, and that basically just, I would imagine, just be, if someone knew that, was aware of that in their chart, to be very, very careful of accidents, but also accidents involving water, just because of that metaphorical drowning. Now, I haven't done research on that as far as, you know, I've seen a couple points in history where people have had that and have had problems, but, you know, there's people that have had accidents and drowning that I'm sure don't have a sheet conjunction, a star conjunction to sheep. So take that with a grain of salt. But late Pisces into early Aries energy can have that impulsivity emotionally, and start to have impulsive ideas as well. So we had the full moon yesterday. We had the sun and water opposed the moon and earth, and that was at 23 degrees. So again, a very late degree of both. And of course, that is a Pisces 3 energy, Pisces 3 decan, ruled by Pluto. And the moon in Virgo was late, which was a Virgo 3 energy, which is a Venus or Taurus decan, which is a very literal, strongly earthy energy. So it's interesting because when you ask, if someone asks, like in a relationship chart or compatibility, I remember doing a reading for people in the past where someone says, hey, they know that they and their partner are opposite signs, but what they're not considering is there's so much more in the chart, like the Venus, which is love, and Mars, which is energy, the moon, which is emotions, and you almost always find something strong that's not necessarily with the sun signs kind of thing. And even the traditional sun signs that are technically bad for each other, like the inconjuncts or the squares. So for example, an early Aries person could be square an early Cancer person. Now that can cause tension, but that tension isn't necessarily bad. That tension might cause enough energy for them to be interested in each other and even argue enough to keep the relationship going, if that makes sense. If your relationship is always calm and quiet and harmonious, eventually that relationship isn't even a relationship. It's just something that's there that no one's feeding, right? It's like if you never change out your garden, or you never put new paper in your printer, you've never recycled that out, or you put a new filter in something in your house that's filtering out contaminants, you have to recycle that. You have to recycle the water. You don't want to leave everything stagnant. So that's why That's why years ago, that's why you saw so many astrologers that wrote these deep books get so mad about people saying about sun sign astrology. Now, I talk a lot about just the signs, which is sun signs, but I'm always mentioning, if you notice, I'm always mentioning, look at Mars, look at the moon. You got to put it all together because it's a beautiful menagerie of energies. And when you start to see how they come together, you start to see where the strengths are. That's where you can really help someone with astrology. We all have weaknesses and flaws, but if you can find out where the strengths are in someone's chart, and they're always there, the weakest person, the shyest person, the person that feels like they've accomplished the least in their life, there's always strength there, and that sort of thing. So that's the only main star there. And for early Aries energy, we're going to talk about that next week. We'll talk about that. It's basically, it depends on what the degree of Aries is, of course. But once you get past around 3 or 4 degrees, now you're not influenced by the Pisces cusp energy unless you have Pisces in the chart, and then you would be influenced by that Pisces planet. But that was the full moon yesterday. The Sag and Gemini planets also play a strong role in the lessons because they got the square from both of those placements. And the mutable planets tend to they can either be underreactive or overreactive, and they can also be a little manic and restless, and they help people to change and shift, but they can change and shift too fast and be too changeable, or be unreliable and too malleable. So for all this mutable energy this weekend, if you have those late Sag, Gemini, Virgo, or Pisces planets, then depending on how much you have in your chart, it would be really good to just notice how you're using your energy, that mutable energy, and where you're directing it. It needs direction. And when I've done charts, especially for people that have the sun and the moon both in mutable signs, I've done charts where I knew a guy that had the Sag, moon, and Gemini. I knew another person that was Sag, moon, and Gemini. I knew another person that was Sag, moon, and Gemini. I just keep thinking of that sun-moon combo for some reason. I mean, known so many people with sun and Sag, moon, and Gemini. And the mutability in them, the changeability and the restlessness is uncanny in all of them. Different ages, different genders, different people from different backgrounds, different parents. And yet I could just see, and then relating it, looking to their Mercury and Jupiter for those aspects. But all those mutable signs, very, very malleable and susceptible. So you have to know kind of where you're directing that, where you're directing that energy. And then, this full moon, there's like I always talk about, there's these signs that are kind of quiet and they're on the sidelines. It doesn't mean they're not involved in the cosmic wheel, but they're kind of laying low and they're kind of spectators watching the game. And that would be like the Libra energy here, the Scorpio energy, the Capricorn energy yesterday was just inside the first house with no Capricorn planets. Same thing with Cancer intersected. However, as I mentioned, Mars is now direct in Cancer at 18, and it will be going into Leo, back into Leo on April 18th, which that's just a little over a month away. And then we'll be moving forward with Mars and Leo. So for going into Sun in Aries, which is fire, and then having Mercury in Aries, Venus in Aries, and then eventually in a month, Mars is going to go into Leo. All of this Aquarius and Pisces energy, how different is that going to feel when we have so much Aries? So we'll still have a little Pisces energy, but not much. So it's amazing how fast this is turning. And then when the Aries energy comes up, it's going to feel even faster. When Pisces changed, you could feel the shift, but Pisces isn't necessarily a fast sign. But Aries, very rarely is Aries not a fast sign. It's rare that an Aries planet would do something slowly or plotting or deliberate too long on an action or a decision kind of thing. Jupiter and Gemini, a little Gemini there. Part of fortune, the part of fortune in Gemini yesterday was also involved in this T-square, and that would indicate a baby born during this full moon this week. He or she would have the part of fortune in Gemini and Jupiter in Gemini. And even though the part of fortune isn't a planet, the part of fortune would indicate that this baby would get a lot of joy from positive communication with others. Like, because they don't have a planet in Gemini, it's not easily developed. It wouldn't be a natural talent for them. But if they develop the Gemini talent for communication, they would be most likely be very actualized, self-actualized, and very happy. Would bring them joy. And that's the part of the fortune. And also that Jupiter in Gemini too. So the Gemini energy yesterday and today is a little more for the air signs is kicking in a little bit for those Gemini degrees. And then not much going on really with Sag or Leo with the fire, even though we have all this fire here with Aries. So again, still, it's really still all that Pisces into Aries energy and all the mutable energy, which will really get a boost. All that creative Pisces fluid energy we'll all be able to put it into action in the next month with all this fire. Remember, I was talking about in the previous weeks, if you watched me, I was talking about how we had like no fire and it was so unbalanced. And now we're going to have too much fire. So that's interesting. But we have, there's a T-square with Chiron, Mars, and the midheaven. Another T-square with the moon, ascendant, north node, and Neptune. And the sun, this full moon that just occurred, the sun was and is in 10 aspects. Now, even though there's no Leo energy, Leo's ruled by the sun, our sun energy, our SUN energy as a collective group is kind of, it's like there's a little hidden Leo activation because the sun being aspect by 10 planets, 10. So that sun, that will and that life force, which is what Leo is about, is being activated, and it's being activated at the time when we start Aries. So imagine a baby being born this week, he or she, with all that fire, but also with the sun in 10 aspects and all of this tension energy with the squares. That could create a lot of accomplishment and ambition and just a lot of drive to create action. So let's talk about the celebrities. These are all people born on the Pisces Aries cusp, so they could either be a late Pisces or an early Aries. We have Rick Ocasek, who is the lead singer of the Cars. The Cars from Boston, Massachusetts. I think the Cars is one of the best pop rock groups ever. And I think they're underrated. And Rick was an incredible songwriter and an incredible creative force for the Cars, but he was also very difficult with his band members, and he was sort of a recluse because he didn't like to play live, and he liked to do everything in his studio, in his own creative process. And he didn't always get along. He was very sensitive about his songwriting with some of the other band members. And I mentioned Roger Daltrey, I mentioned a week or two ago. He fought in The Who. He fought with his band members about the same kind of things with songwriting. And Roger's a Pisces, and Rick was an early Aries on the Pisces cusp. So with that bickering. Carl Palmer, a musician from Britain, and very, very, very monumental musician in progressive rock, and very much a strong influencer for all music from the 80s to today, and very whimsical, extremely creative, active music. That's another theme. If you listen to any music of people that are Pisces Aries, there's the Piscean whimsy and the creativity of the water, but then there's also this energy that's starting to come forth that's pushing it, that some of the other Pisces energy I was talking about, Pisces musicians, doesn't quite have there yet, unless there's planets in Aries. George Benson, arguably one of the best jazz guitarists of all time. I've seen George in concert, and he's great. He is a dynamo. He's an early Aries, and probably one of the best musicians of any musical instrument on the planet. Incredibly creative, incredibly unique, and the scales of what he does with his voice and his guitar is just he's in the flow. Spike Lee, the controversial director, if you look at his movies are all about birth. His movies are completely raw, about feelings and intuition and groups of people not understanding each other, different races and ethnicities that get into trouble and start to clash and hurt each other because people are not understood and people don't know where people are coming from. And that creates the war. So he knows what he's doing with those themes. Bruce Willis, poor Bruce, looks like he's having a lot of health problems lately. Bruce is a TV actor and theater and movie actor, of course, like from Die Hard. But one of the best movies is the 1999 movie Sixth Sense, where he plays very much it's very atypical for him. It's not a macho role. He is masculine in it, but he's also extremely Piscean. And I'm sure everybody's seen The Sixth Sense at this point, but I won't say the ending. There's a really good twist if you don't see it, but it's really interesting. He really plays that really well. Glenn Close, actress from Connecticut, and she's an amazing theater and movie actress, extremely dramatic, plays those feelings, intense feelings so well. Of course, she did Fatal Attraction, which what a sad, kind of pathetic character she played, but yet she played it with a dynamism too. It wasn't just the Piscean feelings that she put into it. She's dynamic and has energy and can be aggressive, and so that's indicative of a Pisces Aries person who's starting to show a little bit in their craft, showing still a little bit of that raw Aries energy. Eddie Money, I mentioned him last year. He's now passed, a great pop rock singer from the 70s and 80s and 90s. Shaka Khan, she's awesome. Her energy and feelings is unmistakable. She says, I'm every woman. Absolutely very strong. Harry Houdini, he was a pioneer. Pisces is very elusive, and Pisces is a very good escape artist. But Harry was also a showman too. So that the Aries part helped him with that. We have Sharon Core, and I just did a reel on Caroline Core from the Cores, and her sister Sharon, who's another Pisces, is also part of the Irish pop group, the Cores. Beautiful music. I'll do a reel on her probably tomorrow. And then William Shatner, he's my last person, and I just put him on just a few minutes ago, actually, as I was reading up on some celebrities, and it's interesting because William, he, of course, he looks so different now, but when you look at pictures when he was in his prime, my gosh, it was just like a Steve McQueen, James Dean, Marlon Brando kind of thing. Holy cow, man! What a classic, strong, what a handsome guy. Like, just everything about him, from his stature to his bone structure, not just his looks, but everything. It's the way he carried himself. And you can see the commanding kind of nature of Aries, the boyishness, but also masculine. But yet he had a little hint there of being a little like reticent and Piscean. And that also gave him a little, looking at a picture, it also gave him a little bit of not quite effeminate qualities, but a nice, pleasing, more of a gentle quality to his face. I think he has Aquarius rising as well. So that's a really interesting combination, to be a Pisces Aries, early Aries, and then Aquarius rising, which gives him more of the thick beard, thick bone structure here, and also the thickness with the shoulders kind of fleshy and thick is kind of indicative of having a fixed sign rising. People tend to be on the thicker, usually thicker side, with thicker faces from here to here, regardless of their sun sign. The fixed signs usually have that. But William Shatner, he had great chemistry with Leonard Nimoy in Star Trek, and Leonard was an early Aries, pure Aries, not on the cusp. So Leonard was much more of just an Aries, but they were similar yet different, and I think that's why they had that really good chemistry. And that's just a thumbs up symbol. That's a poor attempt at my art of a thumbs up icon from YouTube. So please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Don't forget, please tell everyone you have to sign into your Google account, click all or personalized. Subscribe. So before we go, I'd like to just do a little quick mini meditation. So we're going to just close our eyes. And I think this is really, really important for this time period. This is really strong because not only are we just coming off the full moon in Virgo, but we have that Aries sun at 5:01 a.m. on the 20th Eastern Standard Time. So just close your eyes. Take a breath in and out, preferably through your nose, nasal. Now, I watched one person that I follow on YouTube, and she just did a wonderful meditation on how to get into, talking about getting into a flow state. And I often try to do that for myself, as the way my mind works is my mind can often be too fast or a little too slow. And there's times where I'm not sufficiently motivated even to do my live stream. So that when I try to get into my flow state, I try to find the right pace on how I want to think and talk. And of course, that's different for everyone. But with the full moon in Virgo from last night, the sun in Pisces is all about your mental and physical health coming together. So if you meditate on that your mental and physical health, there's no differentiation between those. Your mental health is your physical health. Your physical health is your mental health. And when one is off, almost undoubtedly, it's not medical advice, but mostly undoubtedly will be affecting the other part. So this is a good time, especially with a Virgo moon, to take care of your health, especially your physical health. Take this week to reduce your sugar intake. Take this week to meditate, work out, do yoga, walk, get near the ground. Then on the 20th, you might want to do this Thursday morning. On the 20th, think about the birth of the zodiac. Think about the fish, and think about someone that's at the end of their life, in their mid to late 80s or even 90, that's ending their life, hopefully on a peaceful note, and that's coming into and becoming the next baby, right? The 0-degree Aries is the baby. It is the youngest creature or baby in the zodiac. So for this week, concentrate on that part of yourself, because we all have Aries somewhere in your chart. So concentrate on the baby in you and how you want to be reborn starting on the 20th. And then on the 21st is the first official degree of Aries. And then that's the time to start moving and take action. And I know that sounds so trite, because that's like what Tony Robbins says. You have to take action. Life requires more than just action. But what we just did, even just simple, you're just setting the seeds and you're setting your pace to try to get in line with the full moon energy coming up to the next moon cycle and getting into the sun in Aries. And then next Saturday is the quarter where Aries and Capricorn are square. And that's very strong because, as you know, the Capricorn moon is all about ambition and striving. So think of all that energy this week, the Pisces, the Virgo, coming into Aries, and then the next quarter moon phase, Aries squares Capricorn. So it's a lot of good raw energy to work with. So I wish all of you a wonderful week. Again, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. I really, really appreciate it. The channel's still moving slowly, but it's always moving. So there's no reason to doubt. And on the last note, as we end Pisces, I had a talk with a family member today, and we talked about how important faith. If you're feeling down in any way, physically down, mentally down, emotionally down, great chat, thanks, you're welcome. You have to muster some faith in yourself, especially. But no matter what life is thrown at you, there's still room for faith. That doesn't mean whatever that is for you. It doesn't have to be religious. It doesn't have to be spiritual or philosophical. Whatever that means to you, whatever faith or optimism or hope, that's really important. So that's what I'm ending on with this full moon going into spring. So happy spring on Thursday. Happy birthday to the late Pisces. If you know anyone born between now and Wednesday, they're late Pisces and having their birthday before the spring. And then happy birthday to early Aries people next week. And next week we'll talk all about Aries and what it's like to start the zodiac. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you for being patient about the live stream that didn't happen last night. I appreciate it. Have a great week and enjoy spring. We'll see you then.